Hi, everyone. I'm Trent Riet, the Director of Customer Advocacy here at Milyli. Joining us today, we've got attendees from different law firms, service providers, government organizations, and as well as some Milylians on the call. So we want to show you how Blackout projects can solve issues common to large document sets and how we can help you simplify these major matters. So we'll start today by reviewing our agenda with Jeffrey Levinson, your account manager lead at Milyli.
Hi, everyone. We've identified some common challenges faced regarding large document sets. Trent will demonstrate 3 ways you can use Blackout projects to hack solutions for them. We'll then have a live Q&A before wrapping up. Let me introduce you to the rest of our support team. To put names and faces to the email addresses you may have seen, here's the Milyli Customer Advocacy Department. If you've talked to anyone on our team and want to go ahead and give them a shout out, feel free to do so now in the chat. Or even better, give us a rating in the Relativity App Hub if you've had a great experience with us. Now, can we get some emoji reactions from anyone on the call today who attended our last webinar? Awesome. Thank you so much. It means a lot to us that you're back, and hopefully that enthusiasm will encourage our newcomers to stick around and ask any questions they have. Last time, we focused on how reviewer-first features, like those in Blackout, can streamline manual review on large documents. Today, we'll focus on the unique advantages Blackout's projects provide when tackling large document sets. 3 of the most common challenges we've seen are reviewing all documents simply isn't possible due to the number of documents. Additionally, coordinating workflows for a large number of reviewers can be difficult. And sensitive PII has many variations that need to be considered. And ultimately, that causes issues like over or under redacting, inconsistency in the production, or poor or missed quality control. These bubble up to money, time, and effort. So let's turn it over to Trent to show us how we can avoid wasting resources.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I know Jeffrey has already said thanks, but again, we appreciate you all for taking the time with us. Another awesome turnout here today. So can't ask, but really appreciate that. So as we mentioned, if questions come up while I'm going through the demo, drop those in the chat, and we'll try to get those addressed as we can, or afterwards we'll do a little Q&A. So for today, I'm going to cover 3 hacks that we've been talking about here. So ways that we hope Blackout can be helpful for your teams in larger review settings. So these are topics that we don't typically cover in our general trainings that we probably had with you before. But these are workflows that we do see on a daily basis that our customers are using to success. So we wanted to bring some awareness, ideas, other ways that Blackout can help your team save time. But even better yet, some of the more tedious relativity tasks you're already doing, make those a little bit easier. So what are these hacks we're going to look at? First off, we're going to look at working with large rule sets and using the Blackout rules CSV. So we'll take a look at some best practices and how you build that out and use those with our Blackout projects. The second one is our reviewer first report. So we've got a new script that we're going to build off from our last webinar and show you how we can leverage that work product that your reviewers are doing with those Blackout features and put those into larger projects on larger doc sets. And then third is going to be converting markup. So we'll look at how easy it is to convert redaction types. Maybe more importantly, fixing redaction text mistakes, misspellings, inconsistencies, things like that. So with that, we will jump over into a relativity instance here. Cool. So typically you're working with Blackout. You're creating projects, right? So if you're familiar with the project page here, right, you're going to be creating a new project, and you're going to be, right, here's our demo project, and then we're going to be typing in rules. Smaller projects, small teams, small set of rules, pretty easy to do, right? You can enter a couple terms here, right? But as you can see, you don't want to be managing and inputting hundreds or thousands of rules here. It is very common. We see our customers, inputting tens of thousands of rules. So, right, not something you can do. So how can we do that? How can we manage that rule set? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to create my project shell. So nice and easy right here. We'll hit create. We'll delete that. So I've got my project created. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump over, and I've got a couple of CSVs open here. So on the right, what you're looking at is the template CSV. So I'll show you how that works, how we build that out, and how you can start to kind of manage a rule set for your projects, for your case. On the left, you kind of see a finished rule set. So what we'll be providing as well, very common ask is, hey, do you have any out of the box rules that we can run, any kind of default PI rules? So we put together a huge list of regexes that we built over time, and we'll be providing that after the webinar. What I've done here on my project is I've cleaned that up. So you can see I've just got 10 of kind of the default here, birthdays, social security numbers with our regexes. And then what I'm starting to do is I'm building out the terms for my project. One very common example are names related to the cases and all the iterations of the different names. So you might be getting into a case where you've got, thousands of names you've got to do, and each of those names have 5 or 6 different iterations. You might be writing some DT searches for them. So you can see here is kind of a small example of what you might see. Along with kind of our redaction type. So how are we going to build this out, right? What you're looking at with the CSV, so this is just kind of common, a lot of questions that get asked of folks that are working with our CSV. So what you're seeing on the sheet here is I've kind of highlighted the green areas, which are the more of like the required fields. So every single row needs to be filled out for these, and these are just going to be our markup types. So we have a redaction or a highlight. Are we doing a text redaction or a black redaction? If we're doing a text redaction, we need to input what is that text we're going to use. So if we're doing some privilege information, let's say if we want to do some PII, we might put PII as our redaction text, and then our scope. So similar of what you see building out your project, right? Your types, subtypes, and scopes, you're setting those same properties here. So we'll just fill all these out. Now, the next piece is we want to write some regexes. So this might be our SS social security numbers here. And then we'll type in our regex that we need. So we might, copy this over here. Okay, so we've copied over our social security number. And then what you'll see is I'm going to skip columns B and C, and I'm going to go to column A, and I'm going to start building out my list here. So I've got Trent Briette, I've got Briette, Trent. Right, so this is where you can see you can manage these and create and build out these rule sheets a lot quicker through your CSV, right? So how much time you're saving there. And then at the end over here, we've also got DT searches. So we can say, here's rule 1, rule 2, rule 3. And then once we're done, right, if I'm just doing everything the same, I can just kind of copy these over and drag these down, copy them all down, right? So again, a lot easier than clicking and selecting those from the front end in the project page. So not only is it a lot easier to build and maintain that rule sheet, right? But I think one of the other bigger pieces that we see a lot is teams are passing rules back and forth through emails, through text files, right? Through Slacks and Teams. And right, if your app support teams are the ones creating the projects and running those, right? And they need to rerun them. They need to fix a rule. They need to update a regex, right? It's a lot easier if you're the one, if your case teams and review managers are managing these rules and seeing what needs changed, just managing that through your CSV, and you're just passing that back and forth and say, hey, can you rerun with this rule sheet, right? Instead of, hey, can you fix this one regex that was on this one project, right? So it's a lot easier to kind of manage and collaborate and just make that communication a lot easier of what needs to be done there for your QC, for your rerunning of projects. So we've got our rule sheet built out. So you can see there, I've, can create 30, 40 rules here in a few clicks, save this off as a CSV. So we're going to use this rule sheet on the left over here. So I've got that saved off, and we're going to go back into our project that I had built. And up here is where you upload this rules CSV. So we'll do that. We're going to do our first pass rules CSV. Click the upload button and you can see I've got 25 rules. We run our project. So you can see how much easier that is kind of creating your project. I think especially for kind of app support teams, right? Those are the ones that we're kind of working with on a regular basis. And then it's kind of communications back and forth between the different project teams. So kind of just being able for them to just take a CSV, upload and run and not worrying about the specific rules, right, is a big help for them. So you'll see that we'll run this here. So kind of some key takeaways while this is running here, and we'll let that finish up, and then we'll go look at kind of the documents after this. But you can kind of see, you're not managing rules within the UI. You've got thousands, hundreds of rules. Makes it a lot easier to create and run your projects. I think kind of like I said, the biggest one I think is just kind of your team organization. Who is handling what jobs on the project and who really needs to worry about the rules or not. And then really over time, what we hope is with the general rule set we'll provide is you guys can start building out your own template and PI kind of like base rule sets, right? You can take your STRs that you're running on projects, copy those into the CSV rule sheets, and as kind of your cases are getting kicked off, you're running through a Blackout project, right? And then your STR highlights are just going straight onto your image documents, and you can help that QC, that review workflow, kind of get into that process a lot quicker. So just a few things that we're hoping kind of, give you some ideas of where you can use Blackout from the beginning of your cases. So running nice and fast for us here. So we'll kind of let that finish off. And then we'll kind of jump over here as this wraps up, and we're going to show us into our second hack. So project is completed there. It's finishing up, and you can see we have some highlights and some redactions on our document here. So what's our second hack is we want to bring in the work product that your reviewers are doing. So, as Jeffrey mentioned, the last webinar talked about find and redact and the suggested redactions. What that was meant for is giving your reviewers more efficiencies from doc to doc review. So, right, on large work cases, you don't want them going through every single document, right? You just don't have the time, right? You need to get through thousands of documents over a weekend, something like that. So what we can do is we can have some reviewers go in. We want them to kind of start using the redactions, use find and redact. So what we're going to start doing here is we're going to do some redactions. So we'll kind of, right, this is kind of their first step review, right? They're going through, they're reading the documents here. You can see I'm misspelling privilege on purpose, and we're going to show you how to fix that in our last one. So as that, for those not familiar with the suggestions in the find and redact, what's happening is as reviewers are drawing these manual redactions, Blackout's starting to keep track of that, and it's going to start suggesting to them those terms that they're redacting, right? So what you really want to push them to do is start clicking the suggestions rather than drawing boxes over those terms, because you want to track what actions they're actually doing for redactions. So that way we can run those rules on a larger doc set. So we're just going to go through here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change these to blue highlights, right? So I'm just going to redact these names, get Enron on there. So, right, have them go through kind of a good doc set here, do some sample review. We'll kind of do that. So we're going to make sure we get these. We've got some names. We've got some important dates up here. Okay. So as you can see, right, as this review is happening, you can see more and more suggestions keep happening as, right, more terms are being drawn and redacted over. So keep clicking on these, and that's going to keep kind of in the back end track what terms they're clicking on. So additionally, we can do some like DT searches, right? What are your reviewers searching for? Out of the box, there isn't a way that we know, okay, well, what terms are they searching for? What are they trying to search for, right? Is there names that they're looking for? Are there social security patterns they're typing in, things like that? So over time, you can start teaching the reviewers, maybe different like simple patterns that they can use, maybe like names. You can start kind of teaching your reviewers like, hey, if you're starting to see contextual information if you're seeing keywords around those, start searching for those words from doc to doc. So, as a case reviewer, I can go pull that report of what I'm searching and run those on projects. So we can kind of get to that contextual information a little easier, right? That's another problem we hear a lot is I have to read through 25 pages of this document and know, like, do I redact Greg Wally right here? So what we can start doing is running these terms on larger doc sets. So, you don't have to read and find everyone. We can at least highlight where it's at and let the reviewer go straight to that point. So that's what we got. So how do we get this out and how do we run these on projects? So another thing that we'll provide tomorrow, we'll send out kind of a webinar packet, and another piece that we'll provide is going to be a reviewer first report script. So in your workspace, you'll install this script. Very simple, just a run. And what we're going to do is we're going to run, and like I mentioned, that's going to run a report of all the terms that are being clicked from the suggestions and output the different searches that your reviewers are inputting in the Blackout search bar. Another very helpful thing that we've constructed this script is this is in the same format as that CSV rules file. So as you can see here, I've got a bunch of date terms, right? On the very end, you'll see some DT searches. And I've got 87 new rules that I can now go run on projects, right? That maybe we didn't have at the beginning. So all I have to do is I can export this list. That's going to export that for us. And I'm going to jump back over to my Blackout projects page. And I'm going to create this reviewer first rules project, right? So we're running a second project here. And all I got to do is upload my rules. I've got my reviewer first rules export. Hit upload on that. Now I've got 66. So it's a little bit different. So I had this pre-canned here. And then we just run our project, right? So now I'm just running 66 new rules on our other, 100,000 docs or whatever we need. So that's going to get some of those terms that we didn't have on our initial rule set that we know our reviewers are redacting on this doc set, right? So, hopefully you can kind of see the benefits there. Let your reviewers kind of save time doing more QC, reading through more of the text where that contextual information is, focusing on those hard, complex Excels where data needs to be, kind of those types of things. Open them up, kind of let Blackout kind of find those rules that are going to be there. And kind of what we're talking kind of workflow wise that we've seen helpful is, we'll just kind of a rinse and repeat process, right? You do another batch of manual review, export those rules, run another project through, kind of keep that QC rolling back and forth as you're building out your rule sets for this case. So as you kind of keep getting new documents coming through, those rule sets are getting larger and larger and hopefully covering a lot more of the redaction needs that you need throughout the doc set. All right. So we'll let that one run. At the end of that, you're going back into your documents here. I'm going to hop back to my first document. Kind of taking us into our third hack, right? So we've done our review. We've done our QC. We've placed our redactions. But as you can see here, it's a little messy. We've got some misspellings. I've got 3 different iterations of privilege. We need to clean that up, right? We don't want to produce a document like this. We want consistency across them. But we also need to get our highlights into redactions. I think like a best practice that I see is if you're doing like early case rules with Blackout, doing highlights is good, like with your STR terms and things. But on the image side of things, it's also fine to just go ahead and use the redaction types up front because you do have the visibility toggle that you don't have on Excels. So that highlighting aspect is a very common thing we see our customers doing on Excels, where they'll run this workflow will show you where they start and do Blackout highlights and then convert at the end. So your reviewers can do that QC, right? When you're on an Excel, you can't see through a black redaction. So you start with highlights and then convert at the end. So how are we going to get this cleaned up? How are we going to convert our redactions? So again, so what you can see here, right? I've got some blue and green and yellow redactions and then some misspellings. So a couple of things we want to do. I want to make all of my yellow redactions into a PII name redaction text. And then I want to make the other colors a black redaction. And then I want to fix this things up, right? So there are a few things you can see that I want to do here in this case. So again, we'll be using a relativity script. So we've got a convert image redactions and a convert Excel script that will provide. How does this work? You'll run your script, and this has a little more inputs here, kind of covering those scenarios that we wanted to do. So we'll pick our population. So our source type, right? So what I said was my yellow highlights, I want to make those into PII name, right? So if we want to categorize the different things, we set up our rules with different highlight colors maybe. So it just gives you some flexibility, right? Like maybe you'll do green for like the contextual terms that you're finding, and you'll do yellow for like your redactions that you know are like hit terms. So just a couple ideas that you can run with there. So hit run, accept that. That's going to go through, convert all my yellow highlights on my images into redaction text. So we just got a lot of redactions converted there. Let's run this again. I want to do my priv. I'm going to fix all these privilege into the actual proper privilege spelling. Got a few there. And then I think I spelled privilege wrong like that. Hit accept. So just with, right, just a few clicks of a button, I've got all those redactions cleaned up and consistent. So super helpful, saved a ton of time. Been on a few calls where we've been on the back end, spending hours trying to get everything cleaned and identify what needs and where those are. So as we can see here, hopefully when I refresh here, you're going to see those conversions taking place. I didn't do the blue, but our yellows and our text conversions. So as you can see here, as they're nice and converted over to PII name. And we've got some overlap because they had highlights and redactions under them, so we can get those cleaned up if we need. But as you can see here, just a few clicks of a button, we've basically got all of our highlights flipped over to redaction text. Now we can go through, do a final pass, make sure we're good to go, make sure all the conversions were there, finish everything up and get those ready for our production. So, in closing here, hopefully out of what we just showed, these are some things that you're already doing. If not, we just hope that some of these hacks give you some ideas, workflows that you can take back to your teams to collaborate better, save time, but overall just provide a better quality review for your team and your clients. So that kind of brings me to the end and completes the demo I had for today.
Thank you for preparing those demos, Trent. I want to encourage everyone to send over any last minute questions about what we covered today. And remember, if nothing comes to mind, you can always ask your questions later. Now for the live Q&A.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Some of our questions have been answered by Tim in the chat, but we will recap all of the questions that have been asked and answered in the PDF that we send over. So don't worry about having to read all of the chats. And we also had a few questions get sent over in advance. So I'm going to ask one of those. Trent, how would you go about dealing with dupe documents in some of the scenarios that you ran through today?
Yeah, dupe documents, another kind of big kicker when you're working with large doc sets. Something we didn't cover today, but what we would do for duplicates is we would run through the three kind of workflows that we did today. So get everything through that conversion to the redactions. And then we would use our migrate project to propagate to our duplicate. So another project type that we have in Blackout, it takes care of that. So you don't have to redact every single duplicate. You redact the parents and propagate those with the migrate project. Good question.
Yeah, I would imagine duplicate documents show up quite often in large document sets.
Yeah.
So another question we had sent over to us in advance was, when you're converting redactions, does that mean they all get burnt into the production, or is there some sort of interstitial stage between the conversion and the actual production?
Yeah, everything that you're seeing on the document itself will get converted. When you're talking Blackout specifically, it's more of if you're familiar with the QC pane, that accept and reject. Anything that is rejected will not be burnt in. Otherwise, everything else will be burnt in.
Great. I received a question about the recording. It will be sent out tomorrow alongside the scripts that Trent mentioned, the template that Trent mentioned, and a recap of all of the questions and answers that we've received. That'll be in our PDF packet that we send over. We just got a question asking, does the script convert the image redactions apply for the natives as well?
The natives will be a second script. So there we will provide a script for your image conversion and scripts for the natives. So an Excel and a PDF script. Yep, they are different doc types, so they do require a different script.
Great. And then we also received a question, is there a way to tell that it is not stacked redactions? For example, where somebody already maybe applied a privilege redaction, but then it has a yellow highlight overlapping it, and so there are two text boxes.
Yeah, good question. Not a great way to tell that. Typically, if you're running that, if you're kind of using the CSV and running the rule sets, the redaction types will be the same, right? So you'd have like two overlapping yellow highlights. So when you convert it, it'll be the same. Otherwise, no, there isn't a great way. What you saw in my demo, I guess, wasn't the greatest vision to show that, was because I ran kind of the same project and rules twice. So there was some overlapping there. So apologies for making that a little confusing, maybe. I know that does happen in the real life. So that's kind of more of kind of that QC process of if you're doing things early and often and repeating it, you can kind of catch things. But also what you'll do is you can get used to kind of how the projects work of like reverting a project, maybe if it's duplicating it. So you can go like revert a certain project and run it, which using that CSV also just makes things a lot easier because you're not always recreating the same like project and rule sets on there, just using the CSV. Well, glad to elaborate on that further. You can just email us if you have more specifics on that, or if you want to talk through that further. Always glad to kind of talk through those questions and more specifics on an exact case.
We do have something that's a little bit outside of what we covered, but it might be worth talking about, especially if I think it falls in line with the idea of using more of the project. So someone asked, for example, when you're targeting a narrower set of documents and you only want to identify some of the dupes that are propagated, but not across the entire workspace, is there a way to limit the duplicate propagation of the markups when using migrate markups, or does it apply to all the duplicates carte blanche?
Yes, so with Blackout 5.1, it is carte blanche across all. In 5.2, we released a feature with an additional input on the destination set, so you can define the specific dupes. Again, that is a 5.2 feature. But yes, to answer your question, that is available on 5.2 to limit that dupe set.
Great. I'm seeing some thank yous and thumbs up. Just a quick last call for any questions. Otherwise, I think we can probably wrap up here. No, just again to share, we'll send out all of the materials that we referenced, scripts, PDF of the deck, answers to the questions, a video that will only be available to customers. We leave those unlisted until we publish our next webinar. So you'll receive those tomorrow morning. And Trent, anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I just, again, thank you all for the questions and of course the time today. Like I mentioned, if there's any questions that didn't get answered or anything else that you want to talk through on these workflows, more specifically, give your team a training on some of these to kind of be live with us, feel free to just reach out and we'll get that training scheduled. So I think that, Jeffrey, how do you want to close things out here?
Well, on behalf of the full team, I want to ask everyone to take a survey about this webinar, which we will also send out tomorrow morning. Tell us your thoughts about the topic, how we did presenting, and what you'd like us to see, to present in any future webinars. Help us make it like you like it. Thank you all again for joining us, sharing your reactions, and providing your questions. Have an excellent day.